ओम श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः. हरि ओम. श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः. हरि ओम. Mundakopanishad, Chapter 3, Section 2, Mantra 7. Explanation. Food yields strength and vitality in us. When a mind is thus well-fed and full of vitality, thoughts manifest, and a very controlled and regulated thought flow over a chosen subject matter is called reflection mantra. Mantra is a Mantra is a formula or symbol repeated often in order to facilitate the above mentioned process of reflection, and mantras chanted in a certain sequence accompanied by the various rituals constitute the karma. As the karma, so the world is very well known to us. A world is impossible without names and forms. Thus, the 16 ringlets constitute the chain of bondage and sorrow provided by the delusive world, which is the creation of the very creative urge in us. This explanation of Pippalada has become very famous in the Hindu scriptural tradition, and we have very many repeated references of the to the spiritual entity in us as the 16-faceted Purush. In the mantra under discussion, the Shruti is trying to explain what happens to the parts, kalas, when the Purusha is realized by the yogin in Samadhi. The lokas enter into their elements just as the serpent enters into the rope, and when the rope is under the light of a torch, the ritual knowledge of the rope ends the delusive serpent. The Devatas' senses enter their corresponding Devas, deities. We have already seen that in the vocabulary of the Upanishads, when they say the presiding deities of the sense organs, they mean only the powers of receiving the sense impulses that are located in the respective sense organs. For example, the eye is considered in Vedanta to be presided over by the sun. This only means that the vision of the eye can function only when its sense objects such as form and color are in the medium of light, and sun being a mass of light. In the poetic language of the Rishis, they say that the instrument of vision is presided over by the lords of the elements. In the case of an individual who has realized the self, the Shruti here explains that these various faculties in the organs, in perceiving their respective objects, roll out of the sense organs into their respective macrocosmic elemental powers, deeds, and the self full of knowledge. When a man with all his organs of actions and organs of action, no organs of knowledge and organs of action intact, lives the life of experiences, he cannot but live without performing actions. The one who does actions is but the ego center in the individual. The ego, we have found, is but the light of awareness expressed through the conditions of the mind and intellect. Hence, the expression used here in the mantra itself full of knowledge stands for the ego in us. To a realized stage, any of the effects of the previous karmas are no more there in the to live through, and again the realization of the self is gained only when the sense of separative egoism is completely and totally annihilated. Thus, the mantra declares that the deeds with their reactions and the ego center with all its false vanities merge to become one with the Supreme Imperishable Being. Mantra number 8. यथा नद्यस्यन्दमानाः समुद्रे यस्तं गच्छन्ति नामरूपे विहाय तथा विद्वान् नामरूपाद् विमुक्तः परात् परं पुरुषमुपैति दिव्यम्. 8. As flowing rivers get themselves disappeared in the ocean losing their special names and distinct forms, so the wise man, free from all his identifications with names and forms, goes unto the highest of the high, the Supreme Divinity. The waters of the oceans in another form become the cloud in the sky, and they falling down in showers gain for themselves a different name as rain, and again when the waters collected together flow down continuously in a stream from the higher levels to the seashore. They are called by a different name as the river. Again, even among the rivers, according to the lands through which they flow, the condition of their waters and their mineral contents, they all have separate personalities and different names. So long as they are rivers, certainly each of them has a distinct personality of its own. Ganges is not Mississippi, Yamuna is not Godavari. But once they all reach the ocean and themselves merge to become one with the ocean, they lose all their separate forms, distinct qualities, and different names, and become one with the homogeneous, vast, samsaric ego center. This ego is the painful mortal suffering, the limitations of the material world. The moment he realizes through discriminative analysis and consistent meditations that he is in his real nature nothing but the spiritual factor, and that even the best very delusive matter envelopments as the body, mind, and intellect can come to exist and therein and threaten his peace and quietude only when blessed by the very divinity that he is. All these egoistic concepts end once forever. When ego has ended, there one experiences pure Godhood, the highest of the high, the Supreme Divinity. Ninth mantra. सयो हवै तत्परमं ब्रह्मवेद ब्रह्मैव भवति नास्या ब्रह्मवित्कुले भवति तरति शोकं तरति पाप्मानं गुहाग्रन्थेभ्यो विमुक्तो अमृतो भवन्ति. 9. He who knows that Supreme Brahman becomes Brahman, and in his line, family, none who knows not the Brahman will ever be born. He crosses grief, crosses sin, and being free from the knots of the heart becomes immortal. Here, the word knowing is to be understood as subjectively experiencing. A Vedantic seeker strives to end his entire negative way of living and to renounce all his animal values of life which he pursued and encouraged during his days of ignorance. As he develops in meditation, he comes to rediscover himself to be the supremely divine and omnipotent and omniscient Lord Himself. All the Vedantic sadhana is only to annihilate our entire false ego sense. When once the false ego conception has been broken down through our discriminative analysis and keep meditation and deep meditations upon the truth of the Upanishad declarations, the seeker comes to recognize the spiritual center in himself. Rediscovery of the spiritual center within oneself is at once the experience of the total divine spiritual presence everywhere. To test a piece of jaggery in any part of the world is sufficient to give us an experience of the taste of all the jaggeries in every part of the world in all the periods of time. Thus, the Upanishads declare that an hour of Brahman becomes Brahman, a drop of sea, so long as it is trembling at the tip of my finger, is certainly separate from the ocean. But the moment it trembles off the tip and falls into the bosom of the ocean, thereafter it cannot claim any separate name or form or personality, but certainly become one with the entire ocean. Similarly, so long as the spirit in us chooses to identify itself with the delusive superimpositions on matter, it certainly has the dreamy experience of a separate existence. This conditioned Atman or the ego has certainly its own sorrows of limitations, suffered sense of limitations caused by the conditionings. The moment the pure awareness as the spirit in us becomes aware of itself and thus gains a knowledge of its own all pervading nature, it certainly becomes one with the Supreme Divinity. This positive declaration of the Rishis that the knower of Brahman becomes Brahman has come to be the very cornerstone of the Advaita philosophy. The mantra under discussion is the very statement with which has raised this Mundakopanishad to the dignity of being recognized as one of the most important 10 Upanishads upon which the great acharyas in Hinduism have chosen to give their serious thought and well thought out and considered commentaries. In the very family of such a perfected master, there shall be born no one ignorant of this Vedantic culture. This is the confidence of the Hindu rishis who provided for their Aryan children to live such a purely scientific and divine scheme of living in the sacred Sanatan Dharma. There is no fantastic exaggeration in this statement, since it must be the everyday experience of every one of us in this world of today that a cultured man has a cultured family and an untutored and illiterate man has an equally uncultured family. When in the ancient days a member of a particular lineage had climbed the ladder of evolution and had reached the roof of existence in the realization of the self. There will certainly be in that family and social rules of behavior and family orders of living. Goes beyond sorrow and sin. One tired of the sorrows in the finite world is the of life is a state where pains has no entry and joy is the only experience. Thus, when we are told here that the seeker who has come to realize the spiritual center in him goes beyond the frontiers of pain, the Shruti is indicating the domain of liberation. Sin is the record etched on the equipment left over by the wrong actions committed in the past. Such ugly scars make a mind disabled and deficient in meeting efficiently the present challenges of life, and they can yield for it only a harvest of sorrow. Ego is the needle that plies through the channels of thought, stitching on the mental stuff during the mind's earlier thought reactions to its external world happenings. When the needle is on in a gramophone box, even if it is playing on the disc, it cannot anymore give out even a single note of its song of joy or cry of pain. Similarly, whatever be the past actions and their consequent reactions registered upon a given mental equipment, unless the mental instrument as such is in contact with the false ego needle, it cannot act upon the individual. Thus, it is that a realized saint is said to be beyond all reactions of karma. This state of freedom from the past encumbrances arising from sins and past heritages accrued from merits is indicated here by the term he goes beyond sin. Such a one knows no mortality, for mortality is a necessary condition through which the finite ego should pass in its dream of continued separativeness. When a man has realized his spiritualhood, that man can know thereafter no death, since he becomes a witness of the very process of the decay of the body, which in terms of our everyday life we call death. This Amrutatva or immortality is never the status of the body. There are many deluded souls who run after quack saints and quaint sages, inquiring for some secret process by which they can reach physical mortality. This is an absurd hope and a pleasant contradiction in terms. Body is material and matter is finite. Immortalizing mortality is an attempt which is literally a continued death. But the state of immortality is a state which can be reached and experienced vividly. When the knots of the heart are bombed out of existence, what constitutes the knots of the heart and how we can redeem ourselves from their bondage have been very exhaustively discussed earlier. Mantra number 10. Tadetadruchabhyuktam. Meditations upon Brahman who possess faith and offer oblations themselves to the fire called Ekarshi and who have observed strictly the Shirovrata. Though the declarations of Veda given out in the Karma Kanda portion have no authority over the Upanishadic declarations, yet when they are uncontradictory or even complementary, they are generally quoted in the Vedanta section as a supporting reference. Here we have an instance where a Rucha, meaning a Vedic hymn, is quoted in support of a statement of the Upanishadic seer. Scientifically, no prescription is complete without a detailed direction as to the doses and other details of administering the medicine to the patient. Similarly, in scientific experiments, without a statement of precaution to be taken, no prescription is ever complete. So too, in the scientific science of perfection, which the Shrutis explain. Thus, though Mundakopanishad, as a textbook dealing with the science of self perfection, has ended with the last stanza, we have here two more stanzas appended to the main textbook as a necessary precaution or warning. The qualifications necessary for a profitable study of this Upanishad is enumerated here in all such statements explaining the fit adhikari. The Hindu Shastra never imagined that a decadent and deceased Brahmanic class would at any time misinterpret them and make use of them as chains of slavery over the Aryan children. The rishis only meant that unless one has all the qualifications enumerated herein, it would not be fully to one's profit to come and attend discourses on Vedanta or to spend one's time and energy in pursuing the practices advised thereunder. Kindness was the motive in the heart of the rishis when they in detail explained the necessary qualifications. It was only in a decadent era of Hinduism that a profit seeking community came to read a cruel meaning in the love statements of the rishis. The priest class, at one time in the history of Hinduism, started the heartless mischief of making use of these and similar statements in the Shrutis to classify the Hindus into two main airtight compartments of haves and have nots in the spiritual world. The haves, the adhikaris, the brahmanas, could alone have the divine wealth of man, could alone write to read and hear, understand, teach, and practice this divine wealth of man, the eternal Bible of the soul, the Upanishads. The have nots, the unadhikari, non Brahmanas, were not allowed even to hear or even to read for themselves the sacred books of their religion. This disintegration of the Vedic culture has culminated in the present day decay and disaster wherein the large majority of Hindus are still seeking their spirit through the violence of superstition and false beliefs, through foreign ideologies and Western religions, through putrefied institutions and social festivals, while the indolent priest class, who have the sanction to make a thorough study of the scriptures and practice them exhaustively, such as the Brahmanas and the Sannyasins, also came to negate the life divine and the scripture dealing with it. In short, these are days where we can call ourselves a Hindu only by the sanction of a long tradition. The entire world of non Hindus in Hindustan are today waiting to be converted into the true Hinduism. Now, taking up each of the qualifications enumerated here by the Rishis, we shall try to understand, in the true spirit of the Hindu culture, the pregnant imports of the terms used by the masters who perform the rites. Rituals have a place in the spiritual sadhana. Rituals, when performed with devotion and without any desires for their fruits, have a unique capacity of integrating the personality of the seeker. Well versed in the Upanishadic literature, higher Shruti literature. In short, a seeker should spend all his leisure time in reflecting upon the one great truth discussed in all the immortal Upanishadic declarations. This alone is what is meant by the term Brahmanistha here. Who possess faith? The power of faith and the necessity of faith for any great achievement have already been exhaustively discussed previously by us, who offer oblations himself. Here, the emphasis is entirely on the word himself, Swayam. There are a lot of people who claim themselves to be Hindus today and who have taken to convenient and cheap methods of God worship and merit hoarding. A very educated and cultured Rotarian recently dumbfounded me by boastfully declaring that in my house we have Gita reading every day for the last 28 years. I believed him first and admired that young man's wonderful chance and luck in life. And as the conversation warmed up quite innocently, he declared, "But I don't know a line of Gita or anything about its content." You could have at that moment brushed me down with a feather. In utter despair, I heard myself asking him, "Why? How is it, sir?" 28 years. Then came the explanation. Of course, I didn't read it, nor do the members of my family. We have arranged it all with a Shastri who comes to the house every day around the year and does the reading for us. We pay rupees 7 a month to the Brahman for his troubles. And this is modern, convenient, and comfortable Hinduism. Quite modern and very convenient too. But the Rishis of old did not recognize this as a part of their term religion. This is only a creation of our own idiocy, and the birthright of fools living through an age of superstition. In order to avoid such misunderstandings, here the Shruti quotes the Vedic hymn which puts all its emphasis. It must have had a heavy pot of fire on his head to write such vulgar stupidity with his dark ink of bottled wisdom. Too literal a translation has brought about such fanatic interpretations, ridiculous and laughable, not only into Hinduism but into almost all the religious literature in the world today. A true and discriminate understanding of this expression could never be that one should learn and of all the most difficult science of sciences, the Brahma Vidya, with a pot of fire on one's head. This prescription can be given out only by an illiterate who knows not what it is to learn and master a science. This, in fact, can only be a figurative expression to explain that a student of the Upanishads must have a burning desire to intellectually grasp the meaning of the panorama of life. Only an intellect that is on fire, demanding to know immediately a way out or an escape from the realized limitations of life, that can ever hope to understand and live the divine values of the inner life as advocated in the Upanishads. It is this intellectual quest, this intellect on fire. Mantra number 11. Tadetat satyam ऋषिरंगिरा पुरोवाच नैतदचीर्णव्रतो अधीते नमः परम ऋषिभ्यो नमः परम ऋषिभ्यः. 11. In Mundakopanishadi तृतीय मुंडके द्वितीय खंडः. That is the truth. Rishi Angira communicated this to his disciples in ancient times. No one who has not observed any vow renunciation is fit to study this. Our salutations to the great sages, our prostrations to the great seers. That and this. It is very often a peculiar usage in the Upanishads, which is nowhere else so frequently seen in the entire Sanskrit literature, which is perfect and satisfying. To this query, the Master's answer throughout the scriptures is Tat Tvam Asi, that thou art, meaning that which you are seeking is really thy own eternal nature. Pointed out by the pronoun that here in the Upanishad we have the statement that this meaning the goal that has pointed as utopia, which has now become so near, been now brought within the penumbra of the student's understanding. The statement that this is the truth is only a direct statement by the Rishi to indicate to the student that he has explained all that has to be explained and that there is nothing more for the master to explain on this topic to the student. Rishi Angira is the guru who gave this discourse in the ancient times. The Upanishad is advised by the teacher to the disciple with the warning that the disciple in his turn should not make this knowledge cheap and give it out to anybody who has not the real mental qualities and intellectual qualifications to profit by this great knowledge. No one who has not observed any vow. Vrata means a practice of some self-denial which necessarily undertaken. The vow implies a spirit of renunciation in the individual who has sacrificed, who has undertaken the vow without a mental attitude ready for self-sacrifice and self-denial of the fleeting charms of the sense life. The seeker cannot have the necessary amount of mental poise and intellectual sharpness to understand Undane with single pointed concentration, meditate upon the deep significances of the scriptural declarations. Hence, it is that the great Rishi has left for posterity this clear rule that nobody who has the required mental caliber should be initiated into the Vedantic truth. Here again, we must carefully note that this injunction is given out not to serve as a handle to the whip of persecution, which one section of the society may use to tyrannize over another less developed community, but it is mentioned only as a guidance to all. It is given out only to bring before our attention always the great necessity of maintaining a continued and consistent sense of renunciation of the false and the base. If we are to seek the ultimately discover the truth, the self. Our salutations unto the great, unto the immortal rishis, our adorations to the godly men of the Vedas. End of chapter 3, section 2. Here ends the Mundakopanishad. Om Tat Sat. Hari